but is it morally justifiable? And if it is, you would have to look at some type of utilitarian theory stating that certain people's lives are adding more utility to the situation than others. And then the last case, which was really interesting, I thought, sort of the responses were across the board, was in the cannibalism case. Some really interesting things came up. Many people thought that if there were a lottery system involved, it would be okay. And of course, the main reason for that would be that there's consent involved. And essentially, what you're saying when you say that consent would allow the cannibalism in this case is saying that there are categorical moral principles and people do have more rights. What happens when you have consent involved is that essentially that person and all the people in the group are consenting to say that I'm willing to suspend my rights if my number is drawn. Another sort of thought that came up from the cannibalism scenario was, hey, it's just survival of the fittest at that point. Sure, if we were in a functioning society and everyday life and things like that, then yeah, you don't do things like that. But when it comes down to life or death, anything goes, so to speak. And that's really a form of consequentialism as well. You're trying to maximize utility. You're saying that it just makes sense that if the one guy is sick, he's dying, that 4 people should survive instead of the one. So even within those answers, which may at first glance not seem to be exactly categorical or consequential, that's essentially what they are. And then another thing that was really interesting, and this may be a justification, I don't know. People are just they're psychotic, they're out of their mind. You haven't eaten in a week, 2 weeks, something like that, then you're not thinking clearly. So yeah, I thought the first discussion went really well, and that's just sort of a primer. First of all, for those people who don't have any philosophy, which I notice most people in this course don't have a long background, a long background in philosophy, to give you some background of the basic theories that we're going to be talking about throughout the course. And also it's just a way to sort of to view how the discussion is actually going to work throughout this course, and I thought it went very well. So moving on to this week. This week we're going to be talking about the basic skills of how to read, how to write philosophy, and how to construct arguments. Essentially what you're going to find out when, because philosophy is obviously a very broad term and it's very difficult to define, but in the academic sense, when we talk about philosophy, what we're talking about mostly is a methodology. It's a way of constructing arguments and a way of approaching the big questions in a systematic way that can give us some sort of validity, when we're approaching these questions. So instead of just getting opinions or, asking broad sweeping questions with no answers, we're trying to apply a type of systematic approach to answering these questions. And the way that's accomplished in philosophy is through logic and argumentation. So philosophy is not easy to read. Philosophy can be quite challenging, and that's one. Since this is an intro course to philosophy for most of you, we're going to try to break it in slowly. But reading philosophy obviously is not like reading a novel. You have to read actively, which means when I'm reading philosophy, I take notes. I have a notebook anytime I'm reading a philosophy paper, and I jot down notes. And you have to read very carefully because oftentimes authors or philosophers are not going to make their arguments as explicit as you're going to see in Vaughn's book when he's pointing things out. So you have to read really carefully when you're trying to identify those arguments. Interestingly, and I think it's in the first chapter of Vaughan, you're going to see actually a piece on cultural relativism, and I wish I could claim the brilliance to say that I knew that was going to be in there when I ordered the book. Mainly I ordered the book to help you guys get an intro to reading and writing philosophy, but sort of an added bonus is that James Rachels, who we'll read later in the course, is actually giving an argument against cultural relativism. So I think you'll find that interesting. Then the second chapter of the book talks more about logic. It's going to talk about what constitutes an argument, premises, conclusion, what it means for something to be a valid argument, what it means for something to be a sound argument. It's also going to talk a bit about inductive arguments, and that's good information to know, but for the most part in this course we're going to focus on deductive arguments, but definitely learn the stuff on inductive arguments because you're going to run into those as well. One of the ones that you're going to see probably the most commonly is something that's called an argument from the best explanation, and you will encounter that in philosophy quite a bit. Another thing that you're going to look at going along with the logical arguments are logical fallacies. There are several fallacies that are in reasoning that people often will appeal to. There are such things called ad hominem arguments, ad baculum arguments, things like that, and then just faulty reasoning. Once you learn sort of the logical structure of certain arguments, for example, there's something called modus ponens, which basically it's an if-then statement. It says if A, then B, and that's the first premise. The second premise is A, then you can draw the conclusion B, and that's just a basic rule of logic. But there are certain fallacies that look similar to that type of argument that actually are not that type of argument. So I encourage you guys just to look closely at that. Then the third chapter is when Vaughan actually starts talking about how to not only read the philosophy, but how to construct a philosophy argument as well. And I thought you guys did a decent job in the first discussion of actually supporting your positions, and that's the key. That's what I want to see in this course. Is I don't want to just see your opinions. I want you to give logical reasons and evidence for the reason that you supported that particular position. He talks about avoiding emotional appeals, which I understand, and I think all philosophers understand that emotions play a huge role in our decision making. Hume, one of the most famous philosophers who was a big-time, logical guy, said that reason is the slave to the passions, and it's often true. But the field of philosophy tries to avoid that as much as possible and tries to focus on logical reasons. So that's what I want you guys to focus on in this course. And then there are just some other general writing tips that are going to serve you no matter what you do, which are writing in an active voice, writing in first person, organizing your argument very clearly so people can understand, writing a good introduction, conclusion, things like that, because that's oftentimes one of the big struggles people have in philosophy courses is writing clearly and constructing an argument and writing philosophically. So that's a skill that I want you guys to have if you do take future philosophy courses, or it'll help you in anything you do. And the final thing that we're going to do for this week is we're going to look at a case study, basically showing how can writing philosophically or constructing an argument, how can it actually help you in your everyday life. And that's what I want to do throughout this course. I noticed a lot of you in your introductions were really interested in looking at other cultures and looking at how a lot of this theory can inform real world situations. And I'm going to try to include quite a bit of that into this course. I think every Friday I'm going to try to give us a case study when we're not taking the midterm and when you're not writing your final paper. And then, for the rest of the week, essentially what you guys are going to be doing is reading Vaughan, and then you're going to be taking a quiz on some of the major points that Vaughan has. Also on the quizzes, I have it set up. Once again, my intention in the quizzes is not to, grade you in a very surprising or shocking way, but my intention is that you guys understand the material. So with that said, then I have the quizzes set up to where you can take the quizzes as many times as you want to get the best grade, but I want you guys to read the material carefully, and I want you to score well on that. So we're going to take those quizzes, we'll have the case study, and that'll be the end of week 2. Hope you all had a great Memorial Day weekend, and look forward to seeing you on the blog. And if you have any questions or comments, please feel free to send them my way. Have a great week.